which is okay today with such a wonderful weather. So welcome. My name is Christine Kelly-Sanchez, and I am the Associate Director of the Miami, Florida Chamonix Center of Excellence and European and Eurasian Studies Program at FLU. I am pleased to welcome you today to this presentation on minority group and territoriality in the European Union and beyond, which is part of a 3-year grant on the theme of societal inclusion and societal diversity, which we at Florida International University received from the European Union. Today's presentation aims to explore the social inclusion and minority rights in the European Union, the United States, Latin America, and beyond. And we have invited today for that an expert to discuss about ethnonational diversity and its accommodation in Europe and beyond. Before we begin, I would like to thank the European Commission and the delegation of the European Union to the United States for graciously funding this presentation, our partners at Florida International University, the Stephen J. Green School of International and Public Affairs, the Department of Politics and International Relations, the European and Eurasian Studies Program, and of course, our partners at Florida Atlantic University. Mrs. Amy Arraras is here with us today, and we welcome her. Thank you so much. I want to sincerely thank our speaker, Dr. Renat Shaykhutdinov, for taking the time out of his busy schedule to join us today. And at last but not least, our moderator, Dr. Astrid Arraras, our teaching professor in the Department of Politics and International Relations. Astrid, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, class, for being here. Thank you for our distinguished guests. And it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker. I want you to know that this class is on comparative politics, and we have spoken about rights, refugees. We have spoken about different parts of the world, so they have some information, but we're going to benefit so much from your knowledge. So please let me introduce our distinguished guest speaker. Dr. Renat Shaykhutdinov came to Florida Atlantic University in 2007 from Texas A&M University, where he received his PhD. He earned BA degrees in political science and international relations and sociology from the University of Bosphorus in Istanbul, Turkey. His teaching and research interests include comparative and international politics, ethnic conflict, research methods, power sharing arrangements, decentralization, and the politics of the former Soviet Union and Central and Eastern Europe. Our professor is a native of the East European city of Kazan, and he's going to tell us something about his city, located in the Middle Volga region, and is fluent in Tatar, Russian, and Turkish. Please join me in welcoming your class is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for a wonderful introduction. Thank you for a great impeccable organization of this presentation. Thank you to my colleague for inviting me and giving me this opportunity. And absolutely, yes, I do come from the easternmost part of Europe. It's where I was born and raised in the city of Kazan. And I belong to the largest ethnic minority in existence still in the Russian Federation, called the Volga Tatars. And you will hear a lot about the situation there and the politics there today, but this gives me a great opportunity to actually introduce this very topic of minority groups, territoriality, both in the EU, Europe, and beyond. Let me start with this question, with the question of ethnonational diversity in the world. How many ethnic groups are out there in the world? Anyone? Yes.
4.
4 in the world. Yeah. Okay.
I think, can I give you a range? I think it would be somewhere in like maybe the tens of thousands range.
Okay.
4 is a good guess. 4 is a good guess.
4 to tens of thousands.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give it like an 8,000.
8,000. Okay, good. Yeah.
I think maybe 50 to 100. I know that they're guessing the thousands, but feel like every smaller, like in some 50 to 100.
50 to 100, okay.
1,000.
1,000, okay. So we have quite the range, quite the number here. Well, and that's good, that's important because there are some who study ethnic politics and claim that you cannot really fixate a person in one particular ethnic group, and ethnicity is very much fluid. But there are others among us who still like to count and do things quantitatively. But depending on who you talk to, you can find a number somewhere in between 2,000 and 5,000 ethnic groups worldwide. Those who study ethnonationalism quantitatively, I think probably the most comprehensive data set is being compiled by Amara, All Minorities at Risk. So in their data, they count sample frame, you can see here, sorry. Handle myself here. So over 1,200 groups. So it's I think to me, comparatively speaking, it's the most comprehensive data set. It did start as MARA, Minorities at Risk at the University of Maryland. I think we are cooperating with also University of Michigan. But this is what they do. They've got the this huge sample for which they're trying to collect the data for. As far as Europe, more specifically European Union is concerned, we also have a lot of minority groups there. There are more recent migrants, and there are also the autochthonous groups. Autochthonous would be indigenous to the region, to the continent, many of which do not have their own states. So if you look into the map of Europe, as far as the nations of Europe are concerned, the map does not seem to correspond necessarily to the borders of the states.
Oh, I was going to ask you, like those numbers, does that only count for the ethnicities or the ethnic groups that are actually recognized by these states?
Well, that kind of goes into the very question of what is it that who is the group? Is it being constructed? Is it something which is primordial? And that's why we have the range. So I'd say it's both. So I guess on the lower bound of the range, you'd see a more restrictive number, and on the upper level, you'd have more than that, right? So we've got all of this number, right, from 2,000 at the very least until 5,000. And yet we have how many states out there in the world?
190.
Exactly, so less than 200, right? 193, I guess, members of the United Nations in Council of Territories. So the question is that many of those groups do want to, are quite ambitious and want to be having some sort of representation of sorts. They don't want to be lost, they want to have a voice of sorts, and yet being a member of the club of states is very difficult. It's not easy. So what is the what are some of the ways in which states try to recognize and accommodate this immense ethno-national diversity?
Regional governance.
Excellent. So regional is one.
Recognition or by representation.
Some representation, right? And they might have some ethnic parties. They might have certain quotas in the parliaments, in bureaucracies, in the police force. They can, yes, some regional governments, which I think is probably the most serious way of handling ethnic diversity. But there's also a huge range there. On the one hand, some governments may say, I don't recognize any, ethnic diversity other than the main group in the country. In fact, all of us can be, Russians, or can be Turks, or can be Romanians, or French. So governments may just say that no, there is nothing of that nature, which we do. So at the most grotesque extreme of this, you can see the policies of the ethnocide and even genocide. So when You look, I guess, some of the most recent examples of this would be the plight of the Rohingya in Myanmar, and you also see the re-education camps in northwestern part of China in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous District of China, where the indigenous populations are put into these huge re-education camps. There are others who, yes, when you said there is a recognition of rights, that would give the personal or cultural rights to a particular population, regardless of where that population resides in the country. So you're not bound by a particular region. The rights follow you. And so French Canadians, for example, can have a right to speak their language everywhere in Canada because it's a co-official language with English. And it's just some of the examples of this cultural and personal autonomy, which are not connected to a particular region necessarily, but apply to the country as a whole. They connected to the group in question. That is. Then again, we said some ethnic political parties. There is a Danish party, for example, in the German region of Schleswig-Holstein, closer to the Danish border. You would also have certain ethnic quotas in South Africa, in Northern Ireland. They try to have some quotas for various ethnic conventional, ethnonational groups there, so that you have a particular portion of people recruited into the bureaucracy or the police force. So we've got a whole range of those policies. However, to my mind, the most serious policy, the policy which signals the highest credibility on the part of the government to recognize and accommodate ethnic diversity is that of territorial autonomy. You can ask me why, and I'd say that because it does have the strippings of the states or quasi-states with the flags, with regional parliaments, with the regional executives. So that's quite important. Again, in academia, there is a lot of debate whether it's good or bad. There is some of us in my camp would say that it's good. Ultimately, it's the right thing to do. It's a recognition of difference. There are others, and in fact, in the long run, it can specify the some conflicts. It can signal to groups that they should give the loyalty to the state because state recognizes them. There are others who say no, actually it emboldens bad behavior. In fact, it's a first step towards secession, and it can fuel terrorism. Now we're just giving them more resources to conduct bad things, so to speak. So there is some sort of division there, right? And yet, whether you're on one side or the other side, this institution is quite important.
You can go first.
What if the argument that you were mentioning of the other can't be made of, like in cases like Scotland, where they were given sort of devolution, and now there's more argument for them wanting to secede, and it's becoming like a very hot topic issue?
Sure, but I think UK is a democracy which seems to be accommodating enough, so there is enough autonomy in Scotland, and yet I think they seem to be bound by the legal process there. In fact, during the Cameron term in office as Prime Minister, they were given an opportunity to vote in the free referendum, and they chose to stay within the UK. Brexit changes things. There are, I guess, other dynamics there, but it's, I guess, to me, it's one of the kind of ideal typical cases of autonomy when kind of both groups, both this central government and the groups seem to be kind of in more or less stable agreement. But it's a process.
A bit of a two-parter. Does the state have to follow a formula from going from not recognizing an ethnic group or a national, a nation, and then to the point of actual full representation of those groups? And then also, how does, with what you were describing, the pro and the con, how does assimilation relate to that?
No, it's a huge question, and there is no set formula, and a lot depends on the institutional regimes in the country. A lot depends on the idea how the state thinks of itself, in what terms, whether it's a multinational state or a uninational state of sorts. So there is a lot to kind of think there, but I guess in general, with the development of nationalism, usually the majority nationalism is being privileged at the expense of some of the minority nationalism. But we can talk more about this as we go. But going back to territorial autonomy, again, it kind of is related to the question of both of you. Territorial autonomy is a rare event. States are not too willing to give the territorial powers to regional governments to the groups in question. So in my previous research, for example, I counted 29, 30 of them. Again, the list is not exhaustive because it only pertained to the groups which were part of one of the previous waves of the minorities at risk data. So not all groups made into that particular data set to begin with. And from among the data set, however, we see a relatively small minority of groups getting regional territorial autonomy from their governments. Another, I guess, point is my definition of territorial autonomy is, I set a very high bar for it, whereby the autonomy must be meaningful, the autonomy must be agreed by both the central government and the representatives of the ethnic or national community in question. So it will exclude certainly some of the Soviet autonomies, it will exclude some of the autonomies in the People's Republic of China. So that will be an issue there. And as far as the territorial autonomies in the European Union are concerned, we still have quite a number of them there. Perhaps one of the most obvious examples is Spain. It's the country of autonomies. There are autonomous communities. However, at the inception of the democratic constitution of Spain of 1978, the kind of term nationality pertained implicitly to three communities. So it's to the Catalans, of course, right? Catalans, in fact, on the map of Spain, they are sort of located here, right, on the Barcelona area, even though the Catalan world is bigger than this. So you have the Balearic Islands, Valencia, the state of Andorra, independent state, and then even in Sardinia. Then we've got Basque Country, because it shifts. It's, Galicia would be here, the Basque Country is here, but they are also classically in southwestern France, and Galicia is linguistically related to Portuguese, but it's but they're separate. Certainly. Well, UK is not in the EU anymore, but they used to be in the European Union, and the EU had the autonomies of the UK as well, such as Scotland and Wales. You can probably add Northern Ireland into the mix there. Further, we have Italy. In Italy. Italy recognizes 5 autonomous regions. The 5th being Sicily, but I would view Sicilians more as Italians and who are not that much ethnically distinct from the rest of Italy. However, when it comes to more distant minorities, you would see, especially would be South Tyrol. It's a German-speaking area here in the by the Austrian-Swiss border. Right, so it's here, Bolzano in Italian. Then the smallest region in Italy is actually a French-speaking Aosta Valley. It's by the Swiss and French border right here in this corner. Yes, made it bigger here, right? And then Sardinia. Sardinia has some limited autonomy as well. Venezia Giulia is the area by Slovenia. It's also a regional autonomy. However, it's not. Slovenian is kind of allowed to be spoken and schooled in some parts and some counties of that region. So it's it's not. I wouldn't say it's a typical autonomy, but still there is quite important and vocal Slovene minority in that part of Italy. Further, going to Northern Europe, we've got the example of the Åland Islands. It's a Swedish-speaking region of Finland, which you cannot freely just migrate there and buy property from the mainland. There are some important protections for them there. Also, in Northern Europe, we've got Denmark. In fact, Kingdom of Denmark, the other two being Faroe Islands and Greenland. Well, we can debate whether Greenland is part of Europe or part of North America, right? And Faroe Islands are part of Europe. And interestingly enough, I guess Denmark gave them sufficient rights for both to opt out of the European Union. So they are part of the Kingdom of Denmark, and Denmark is a part of the EU as we know it. But in a referendum, for example, Greenland decided to opt out of it, even though they're Danish citizens, right? So it's it's quite a lot of regional authority that they've given to these groups. Great. So we've got these autonomies which are currently in place within the bounds of the European Union. Historically, however, also we see some autonomies which are not in existence, belonging to the countries which are now part of the European Union, or which are heirs to the previous countries there that had autonomies. And the case in point is Czechoslovakia. Not many people know that in the pre-war Czechoslovakia, in the interwar Czechoslovakia, there was an autonomy granted to this tail here. It's after war they lost this tail. It is now part of Ukraine. It's primarily Hungarian-speaking, Hungarian majority region of Ukraine. It used to be a part of Austro-Hungarian Empire, and it's also home to the group called Ruthenians, Rusians, or Lemkos. You might know Andy Warhol, so his parents are actually Lemkos. Those from that part of Europe. So this small tail of interwar Czechoslovakia was given an autonomy, I think in 1938, was negotiated autonomy, and it was wanted autonomy, and then they declared independence on the same day they were formed and became a part of Hungary after the decision was made to partition Czechoslovakia. Even though I don't have quite high regard for the Soviet autonomies, still in Romania, in the socialist Romania, they used to have a Hungarian autonomous district. So again, this part of Romania is composed of three major parts. Wallachia here, Moldavia, and Transylvania, which was a back and forth between Austria-Hungary and Romania. And during the communist times, they had this region, Hungarian region, right in the center of the country. It shifted a bit, had a border change at some point, and Ceausescu decided to do away with it. So there is some rich legacy of this in the case of the European Union, both historically and currently. Here, across the border from Romania, we've got an independent country of Moldova. Moldova is also a Romanian-speaking country, but it's not part of the European Union. However, one of the most prominent examples of territorial autonomy came out there in 1990s, in mid-1990s. They gave an autonomy to its Gagauz minority. So it's Gagauzia, and it's a home to the Turkic-speaking minority in that country, which kind of brings me to the former communist world with Russia as being at the forefront of that particular world. So the official name of Russia is the Russian Federation, right? So it still keeps federation in its name. It's a typically very centralizing, very centralist federation, and yet constitutionally it is still a federation. The federation that Russia keeps is a legacy of the Soviet times when ethnonationalism was somewhat taken seriously, and in fact the Soviets would claim that they were the first country to actually give the rights to ethnic groups, ethnic minority groups. Well, you can still cite Tsarist Russia, the Ottomans, the Canada, and such. but so it's portrayed as such. So it was a way for them to deal with ethnic diversity. This federalism is asymmetrical, meaning that some regions have more powers than others, and it's the case with Canada, for example. Quebec has, I guess, by and large, more powers than other provinces and territories of Canada. United States federalism is pretty much symmetrical if you don't count some of the dependencies, the territories like Puerto Rico, which is kind of somewhat in the limbo, but at the same time I would count Puerto Rico as a territorial autonomy as well. So since year 2000, in the past 20 plus years, the power of regions has decreased drastically. First, there were 7 regions that were 7 federal districts, which were supra-regional. It's mega districts. They were instituted with an appointee from Moscow and the full control of the regions that were part of that. Then the elected governors of Russia's regions and republics, oblast republics, were done away with, and the elections are indirectly done now with just from a list submitted by the Moscow Kremlin to the regional legislatures, with an act of dissolution of those legislatures if they don't go along with the proposed governor. So it was done after the terrorist attack in southern Russia, Beslan, in school, and so it was essentially used as an excuse to do away with elections. Yeah, so the country looked like this at the time of of its independence in 1991. Depends from whom, of course. So 89 regions, and what's interesting is that yes, most of Russia is 80+% would be claimed to be ethnically Russian, but at the time when you look into the actual territory, and yes, I guess from outside you would think that it's a homogeneous monolith. But when you look into the actual map, whatever in pink is were ethnic homelands. So the actually Russian majority regions were in minority there, and most regions with the oil resources, with diamonds, were actually ethnic homelands. So again, in the last 20 years, especially there was a lot of centralization going on. You've got 7 federal districts here. That number was shifting somewhat. You've got the 8th one, and then after the takeover of Crimea, they made them a separate district, and then they merged them again into another one. So they've got this type of arrangement, and between 2003 and 2006. The chief executive of, the blessing of the executive there, they have started to also getting rid of the ethnic regions, to start to merge them with the Russian majority ones. So 6 of the weakest regions were gone. So whatever you saw on the previous map, that map is drastically different right now, with lots of minor regions are now being merged into the predominantly Russian ones, and in essence being subjugated to them, with implications, of course, for diversity there. Again, so this is kind of what the country looked like, so at least in the internationally recognized borders there, without taking into consideration the ongoing events. Well, when it comes to the specifically ethnic regions of the Russian federations, there are 2 clusters, 2 ethnic clusters here, which are worth attention. One of them is located here in the North Caucasus. You can see a cluster of numerous republics here, and the second one is in the Middle Volga. So the Caucasus is interesting. It's considered to be perhaps the world's most diverse region. So squeezed in between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea, you can walk into one village and speak one language, and then you just several yards away would walk into another one that speak a language that comes from a completely different family of languages. So you've got this immense diversity squeezed in this small amount of land, still by and large considered to be a part of Europe. The key, I guess, the most salient region of them all would be what?
The most what? I'm sorry?
The most salient, the one that we hear used the most?
Chechnya.
Exactly right. So Chechnya is seen as the most salient part of that. And again, another region is more populous, more industrialized, but you would hear less about it in the news. It's the Middle Volga. And the Middle Volga is an agglomeration of 6 republics, 3 of which are Turkic, 2 Muslim, 1 kind of Orthodox animist. The other 3 are Finno-Ugric. And so in essence, this is the 6 republics of the Middle Volga, and many are being just assimilated extremely fast. Again, implications for the diminishing diversity there, and among these 6, the prominence goes into to Tatarstan. So it's where they are on the map of Europe here. Well, Tatarstan, for the most part of the since the 2000s, has had a functioning autonomy until maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Chechnya never had one, and what's also interesting is that many pundits were expecting a hot, bloody conflict to take place in Tatarstan, just because it was, more industrialized, more resources, more population. But interestingly, it was the dog that didn't bark, so nothing happened there as far as violence, conflict is concerned. However, with respect to Chechnya, we have seen 2 modern Chechen wars taking place in the late 90s, all the way into 2000s. It's a pretty lengthy war, and in fact, it's been considered in the top 5 of the bloodiest civil wars ever. Now we can add into the time when Turkey was writing it, it was a 5. You can probably say it's 6 because of Syrian civil war, but still, it's one of the top bloodiest wars out there. And when I try to plot them, the levels of terrorist incidents in both Tatarstan and Chechnya, you can see kind of here. A spike was in the at the time of the 2000s, this anti-terrorist operation that went down, right? And, with the Qatari's presidency there. But in fact, much of the violence shifted elsewhere in the Northern Caucasus. So when I kind of plotted them all together, region-wise, it's this violence went into Dagestan, went into Kabardino-Balkaria and other parts of the Northern Caucasus. That's been disaggregated this by the region. So we've got that. Of course, what it means, I think, is open to debate. What it means on the ground is very much open to debate. In fact, I try to look and examine some of the local language interpretations in the case of Tatarstan of this. So it kind of was the kind of everyday understandings of insecurity, what it meant, and for the locals, they're uncovering a great difference in the worldviews of the local population, as opposed to the thank you so much, as opposed to the Russian-speaking world, and much of the music here would come from some correspondence. If they're not in jail yet, they would be in Moscow. If they speak a language, it would be a Russian language, and they would hardly travel elsewhere. And so it's kind of the issue there. But it's been puzzling. So there is autonomy in one case, and not autonomy in another case. There was violence in one case, but not in another. So Those who would kind of consider them from the region with higher knowledge would see the salience of Islam in both. Doesn't really help to explain much. In the 90s, they would also cite the mafia factor, the criminality in both regions, and the institutional design of Soviet federalism. Both were second-tier autonomous republics within the Soviet Union, and still it does not help us. Again, another source that I looked would still kind of show this previous status as autonomous republic. Population factor is not helpful either, because you'd expect those regions with more population to rebel, and yet there are three times as large population-wise as Chechnya. Again, Islam in both, not much of a difference as far as the indigenous populations. Proportion within the both regions is concerned. Both have oil, both have some degree of strategic importance. So still, the puzzle is ongoing. And not to bore you too much with whatever has been done, most things that have been done, both are seem quite unique, quite exotic, and people study them kind of separately. Very few actually do that comparatively. The mere 3 or 4 studies that I was able to uncover, they back 20 years to the time of the second Chechen campaign, and I think there's now time to re-examine them. It's a high time to examine them and see whether there might be some alternative ways to explain the violence between the two. So what and again, not to bore you here in the 4 studies, and one says the central government was responsible for granting autonomy. Another one would say it's the regional government, but was wise in one case, was not wise in another case. Then somebody else would adopt the world system theory. I think as far as the migration is concerned, they would not discount the idea of the role of deportations of Chechens, and the trauma, the genocidal trauma that still haunts them. In the case of Tatars, it's non-existent. It's not there. Chechens have this, very recent history of deportations of 1944, when, according to official sources, up to 20% of the population died, on the track. The Chechen historians would claim it's much higher, 40%, maybe 50, 60%. So that's I guess what was going on. But what I am trying to work currently is the factor of culture. Perhaps there is something pertaining to culture that I can explain one's attitude to politics. Again, it's important to be very careful here not to fall into the trap of essentialism and civilizationalism. But there are certain ways in which things are being done that comes from one's background, one's socialization, and that is somewhat the thing that I'm doing right now, looking into the works of some anthropologists in both cases. And how am I doing time?
It's until 12:15.
Okay, great. So okay.
Yeah, you're doing well.
Okay, excellent, great. And there were a couple of questions here. If you
I was just the main question was, I guess, where's the line between territorial autonomy and federalism and giving a state
excellent.
So on.
Take yours too.
I wanted to ask you, in your comparative analysis, gathering data, I'm sure, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume that you come into a range of numbers that are disputed, maybe these ethnic groups claim a certain number of casualties of something or incidents. A state may claim something else. So how do you compile that data and make those graphs?
Great questions, both great questions. So the way I see it, federalism and territorial autonomy can overlap, but they're analytically distinct. So those federalisms in which I'm interested are ethnic federalisms or ethnic territorial ones, like a Russian one, like Indian one, like Canadian one. Right? But there are pure federalisms which have no ethnic component, like German, Austrian, Australian, to an extent, by and large, American. There are some ethnic factors there too. We can discuss those. And yet, autonomies can be a part of federalism or may not. in fact, UK is not a federal country; it's a unitary state, and yet it has pretty decentralized autonomies in Wales, Scotland, not so much in I guess Northern Ireland now, and Finland too, with their own islands. State of autonomous in Spain. Spain is borderline federal unitary, and then Italy is unitary. So yes, that kind of will be my answer to you. Yeah, as far as data are concerned, yes. So I'm trying to be as meticulous as possible with the data, and there are some decisions I have to make. Some points might be coming from more reliable sources, others from none. So you're going to make a decision there. If you're agnostic, if there is a kind of range there, what I tend to just take the average if I have to settle with one point. The cleanest way to do is to run your analysis with kind of both points, lower endpoint and the higher endpoint, to account for things. But it's a crucial question. When you deal with a massive world out there, you just have to consider it and make some decisions there.
Thank you.
Sorry, and going on hand in hand with that, in your study of comparing Chechnya and Tarnotan, it's I wanted to ask you if you take into consideration the diversity that they have surrounding their borders, because I don't know that Afghanistan is very much surrounded by Russian, ethnically Russian population. Chechnya has access to the open sea, the idea that geography plays a bigger role in this. Maybe that's why, even though they're kind of similar, they their influence people around them.
Yeah. So there are studies which would put geography on. Jumping ahead of myself there. Yes, there's some other factors here. Like the geography factor, right? So there's some say there are different opportunities, constraints. Some see it as crucial because Chechen does have, in fact, border to Georgia outside Tatarstan, and the whole Middle Volga is secluded. There is a small strip of this Kurgan Oblast which separates Bashkortostan from Kazakhstan. And again, there is some observers now saying that it's being diversified, that there's some non-Russians which are starting to predominate in that particular part of this. But geography is quite important, of course. Some would say it's also the dispersion. Only about 25 to 30% of all Tatars live in Tatarstan, but the rest are pretty much interspersed elsewhere in Russia and Central Asia. There's historic communities actually in Finland, Poland, Belarus, Lithuania. In China, it's one of the recognized ethnic minority groups out of 56 groups. So yes, Chechens are very much concentrated, which would kind of boost up the resources there. Yeah, so it's again. It's disputed on the one hand, but there's other geographic factors which would be in favor, like the mountains terrain in general would be conducive, would facilitate rebellion as opposed to the plains. So that's why some will say that Poland has been taken off the map of Europe several times and shifting, of course, because it's just in plains as opposed to say some other areas. Albania was able to preserve itself because it's located in the Balkans. So.
Okay, I have an easy question and maybe a not so. One, I have no service in here, so could you show us where Kazan is on the map?
Sure.
I'll start with that. And the second is, I'll throw it out there now. Do you think that any elements of your comparative study could help explain what's happening in the Ukraine?
Yeah. Off record?
Of course it's off the record.
Off the record.
Yeah, off the record.
Well, I do come from a region. I'm not concerned about myself. I have to be responsible for those who are left behind. And people do ask me this question. Okay, so is rebellion in Russia imminent if is going to disintegrate and such. Well, I'd say dream on in a sense, because it's there was a behavior that has been very much rewarded previously. So we've seen it. Chechnya is a case of point. I mean, Putin made the Chechen War. Chechen War made Putin, and there was huge atrocities there. The entire city was leveled. Whatever you see in Bakhmut right now, going on there were previously in Bucha and such. It was the issue there. And I guess much of the world decided to just shut their eyes to that, because it did not concern them, and plus the oil was flowing, right? So it's there. And then we've got Georgia, the Beijing Winter Olympics 08, right?
Yeah.
Long presidency with 4-day war, 5-day war. Not much was done there either. And then Aleppo, Syria, again, Obama was drawing the red lines, like chemical warfare red lines, and yeah, it would have been better for him not to say things, because once you say things, you need to follow through to be credible. It's best not to, if you have no intention to follow through, don't say it. And yeah, it's again, it was something that was encouraging the behavior. And then you've got the Wagner group mercenaries, the typical things that they did in in Africa, Central African Republic, and such. So. But this is to say, it's a long story to say that they wouldn't have done this until they would have consolidated the power and put their own house in order. So many of the nationalist movements of the 1990s in Tatarstan, they were either silenced, bought off, or drawn into exile. And still, like, there was some sort of European Union thing that they on this. They call it the peoples of Post-Russia is how they call it. And again, the Belgian Minister of the Interior, which was the entries, visas, and such, did not allow one of the movement leaders to cross in. He was able to go on Schengen, quite okay, to Italy, but Belgium said no. And then he's got the asylum refugee status in papers in the UK. But I think there's some sort of diamond trade that's going on, because it's very much an important for them. So real political, economic factors are there to a certain extent still going on at the lower level. And in the case of Chechnya, again, there was a blockade of the republic, and the only way it was kind of the backbone of the resistance was broken was because the war was Chechenized. So there was fragmentation put in. Kadyrov was made who was fighting against Russians, was made an ally. And he drastically changed the Chechen society. If I have time, I can kind of speak about the cultural aspect more there, which would come by. But it's in my native Tatarstan, so they got two ethnic regiments that were kind of organized to fight on the side of the federal authorities of Russia. So. Again, it's also, as far as diversity is concerned, it's also quite interesting because some say it's also a sinister way to de-ethnicize Russia, because those who are being thrown as a cannon fodder to the front lines are the people coming from the impoverished ethnic regions, and they're just dying there in droves. And yes, Tatars are kind of more. High status society. Even they were kind of sent this into close to Bakhmut, and the entire region was dismayed. What's that?
Where's Kazan?
Oh, Kazan is at the confluence of the Volga and Kama rivers. It's right here.
You have it in the next slide.
So it's here. Yes, but let me actually get the Google Maps, right? So it's you get a sense of the. Whole thing. So we're right here, right? Unless you forgot. So if well, let's cross the point. So we cross the point, and then we would get to the geographic. The geographical border of Russia would be right here. If you're into the World Cup and such in 2018, the World Cup was there. So I was rescuing some stranded Colombians in the street back then who thought one of the games matches was supposed to be in one part of the country and of the city. It's considered to be as a sports capital, but also it's the Mundial, the World Cup wasn't part there. So it's Moscow, I think St. Petersburg, Kazan, and a couple more cities there. So it's I think it's more a European city than a Russian city. So you've got the Orthodox churches, you've got the I think it's a big yeah, I think it's in Moscow. There was that's the Kazan Kremlin. Yeah, so it's nice. There's a garden of interfaith garden with the mosque, synagogue, and a church there. Yeah, so it's theater. It's Chipos theater. Yeah, so it's where it is. Where it is. So they kind of did well by using some of this oil money that they had in the 90s based on this territorial autonomy, and they actually did invest it there. So it's interesting. Volga just flows to Kazan and makes this sharp 90-degree turn towards the Caspian Sea. So and historically, it's actually connected to Bulgars, to Bulgarians, and if you have time, I can speak about the culture of this regions. So what we're enjoying to, and I think it doesn't really occur to somebody who just studies it, using rational choice ideas and thinking factor and population is going to be like this. And I think it goes deeper, and you kind of need to have some sort of more intimate familiarity to kind of draw those conclusions. So here with the Chechens, starting with them, it's they are anthropologists would think of them as they would say that they belong to the nomadic patriarchal type. They're not nomads, so they're mountaineers, essentially very much sedentarized, and historically their main occupation and the basis of economic life was livestock. So they would keep their possessions essentially in the herd of cattle, horses, and especially smaller animals, sheep and goats. Well, second, it means that the society is divided into patrilineal lines, starting with kind of your extended family, and then into the clan, tribe, and then ultimately tribal confederation. So this was the basis of their political, social, economic life. It provides a basis of identification as well, and one result in economic structures. And one result of this was an extreme vigilance against any outside interference from somebody outside of the camp. It was a democracy of sorts, not your liberal democracy, but it's the one that would have the kind of vigilance over freedom there. And at the extreme, it would be the vendetta. So if somebody takes one of ours, then we have to get one of theirs. So it's a mountaineer culture which does not only pertain to them. I think in parts of Italy was the case, maybe among the kind of Scots too. And I need to ask my wife; she's watching the Highlander. So it's number three, they were a martial race. So they were educated to be warriors. They were brought up to be warriors, and they had mutual raids, which was kind of manifestation of this spirit. But people would get very seldomly hurt in those raids. Why? What was the purpose of the raids?
To show.
Excellent. So that's going to show your courage, whatever, right? But also, there are two things. the purpose was to take somebody else's livestock. So it's money, right? Horse stealing or sheep stealing or so. And also the cost of hurting somebody is very high, right? So you need to be very, very vigilant about not, hurting or killing.
Because then who's going to take over these stock? Who the livestock? Who's going to?
No, and it's a retaliation. Retaliation more than retaliation more than anything else, right? But the most important function of that was to it was an initiation ritual for the young man. Yeah. So they would show their prowess and courage and such. So it's so it's kind of this that they want to do this. And anthropologists, I was reading, would say that you go to you encounter a young man saying, but you do obey your father or your grandfather, you could say. But I do it on my own volition. It's kind of would be the response there. So, but a very important consequence of this is the loyalty, I guess, to kind of, well, it was an emblem of a wolf to signify all these features. And to say that wolf, unlike others, is very loyal to its pack. And then, unlike like birds or feline that other nations would put in their emblems, the wolf will actually attack somebody who is stronger than they are. Like a feline, a tiger or lion would not, or bird would not. Those are weaker. And so they take one for a team, so to speak, and it's. I think you cannot understand political consequences and the conflict there without understanding some of the cultural dynamics there. Yeah, in the case of Tatars, we've got just some of this. I mean, it's a pretty in typical classic Tatar culture. It's quite a rigid culture, a rigid Oriental culture, and men would show jealousy to women. Women are supposed to show respect to men too. It's the way you sit is regulated, and there is some sort of modesty, if not subservience, and humility, which is taken at times to the extremes, and as such, kind of conflict avoidance seems to be, very much kind of encouraged, rewarded, and from that standpoint, I think you have this kind of more standoffish attitude. And even as an editor of the Tatar Encyclopedia was, a quote from him here, that it's, we're accessible most certain people, we're incapable of defending our interests, and yeah, so it's just something that kind of emphasizes this difference between the two. And over time, I think, if we are to follow the historical developments, and I get this from the person who was using the world system theory to show the difference between the two. I think you show it in throughout history. So the early origins before Islam, before encounter with the Russians against Chechens, they said the Monteneer frontier, right? Rigorous etiquette, legal codes, resemblance to the late archaic Greece, right? And in Tatarstan, though it was located, it was not called Tatarstan, it was Volga, Bulgaria. So they are related to Bulgarians who are in Danube. All Bulgaria disintegrated, part went to what's now Bulgaria, side of Black Sea, parts went to the Caucasus to form the Bulgar Republic now, and others went up north to Bulgaria. So they were on the route between the Vikings and the Middle East. So in fact, you have quite a substantive Viking gene there among the local populations, more than in the general Russian population. It was quite interesting. And then all the way until the Mongol Empire. Islams are very different. In the case of the Chechens, again, it came very late. So all the way into the 19th century, Not all of Chechen society was Islamicized. So it's a very late Islamization. Even though Islam came to Caucasus very early in Dagestan with Arabs, to Chechnya it came primarily with the Ottomans and very late. The Islam that came was primarily of the kind of Sufi orders, the Naqshbandiya order and Qadiriya order. In fact, Kadyrov, his of the Qadiriya order, it's where the last name is coming from. And then we've got, in contrast with the Tatars, it's very hierarchical early Islam. It's when Volga Bulgarians essentially converted en masse. Maybe there was some economic conditions going on there with trading with the Middle East, but they were on this route between the Vikings and the Middle East. Then they were Tatars were brutally conquered by Ivan the Terrible. There was some resistance going on for several decades afterwards, 2-3 decades afterwards. But among the current Tatars, this memory is gone. So some intellectual elites, like me, trying to keep the memory of this, but the population at large does not. So it very much identifies with the Russian state. In the case of the Chechens, the resistance went on all the way to the Soviet rule. So it never had. The Russian Empire fought the war with Persia. It conquered South Caucasus, south of Chechnya, went all the way down there to get to Ottoman borders of Turkey, to conquer Georgia, and only then, when it felt more or less secure, went up North Caucasus, and deal with the Chechens there. So, and then again. Before the revolution, the Middle Volga became the industrial hub and cultural hub of Russia. So in fact, if you speak with I was reading several days ago about the Russian nationalism, 3 images of Russian nationalism. 2 of the 3 would think of Middle Volga as inherently a Russian land. So it's key to Russian nationalism. And again, it's shown in the way that it's quite key to this industrial development of the country. But the pacification campaign was there all the way until the revolution. There were the Stalinist period of the kind of collectivizations and deportations. But for Tatars, it meant that it will be even more integrated into the Russian and Soviet society. So lots of intermarriages. Islam was, by and large, was gone, and the historical intellectuals middle class were evaporated, and the Soviet educated elites did not have much of an understanding of the past either. So, and this actually brings us to the Gorbachev times when we see the lots of Tatars having the mobility and losing touch with the roots, wanted to see more kind of independence and recovery of that. And but in Chechnya, for the most part, the locals did not seem to be much in authority. And all of this, I would argue, through this kind of process tracing and the cultural factors, I would argue, is responsible for the negotiated kind of autonomy ultimately in Tatarstan, and it's pretty much a military crackdown in the case of Chechnya without one error. Yes, sir.
A while back you spoke about the region in Georgia in 2008, so the kind of like, not war, I don't know if it classifies as a war or just an orchestration of some sort from the Russian state, but my question is, now that with this going on with the territories in Ukraine, and do these regions, is it going to remain like their territorial autonomy, or is it kind of inevitable to have another attempt from Russia, or on the other hand, maybe something from the EU that also has spoken about making parts like Turkey Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, these areas like into, how does that speak then for the ethnicities that are actually like located there?
With Russia, right? So as far as autonomy is concerned, I think by 2000s, much of my definition of autonomy would not hold. So in Tatarstan, they were able to, the treaty was supposed to expire in 10 years. In 04, they renewed it, and then, or 7, I think, they renewed it for 10 years. In 2017, it expired, very much abridged. Autonomy expired in 2017. The federal side decided not to renew it. The local side wanted to renew it, but Moscow did not. So it expired, allowed it to lapse. After this, education system was an overhaul in the education system. So bilingualism in education was essentially gone. It's just a shadow itself. And what's going on? So there's no autonomy anymore. So in the country, you can call it as a federation, but it's not. Centralized federation. Legally it is, but in practice it is not. And then with other countries, okay, you do see the LNR and the DNR, so it's again, to what extent perhaps the population might want it now, but back then, before the war, were there any polls done? And even the Crimea, some say that if the poll was done, that most of the population have likely stayed with Ukraine if our referendum was done. At this point, it's I think it's the fish is out. It's in the it's a fish soup now. I don't know if it's possible to put it back into a fish tank. This fish, and with the EU, the relations are essentially done. They're gone. So there was the court in Strasbourg, the Council of Europe, the European Court of Human Rights. So they are not a part of this anymore. Belarus was the only European country which was not now. Russia is the second one. So it's gone from the European structures. And technically, they decided to leave the Council of Europe. They were going to be expelled. So the decision was made to expel them. And there are only 2 countries in Europe where with direct flights to Moscow. Serbia is one. Turkey is the second one. The only 2. And then you can go there through. No, you cannot. It's part of the EU restrictions. So the Wizz Air, whatever the Hungarian airlines are, they cannot go there. And so Turks are flying. Serbs are flying there. Aeroflot cannot fly this way. So if you see how they fly to vacation on Cuba, they would just go all the way to the Kola Peninsula, go over Finland and Norway, and then it's the way they fly to Cuba right now. And so Turkey is trying to mediate, but Turkey is minding its own interests. And then within the EU, we've got Orban, of course. So most recently, the Prime Minister, I showed you this region, right? That was part of the Czechoslovakia economy. So it's the region of Hungarians. So just, I think last week, one of his cabinet ministers made a statement saying they will not support any accession of Ukraine to any European institution or NATO. I don't know what it is, but no progress towards EU is going to be done unless the educational rights of Hungarian minority will be respected. And they have a lot of education rights there. And normally, I think the same thing was made back in 2006, so they kicked the can down the road, saying that, okay, the new education law is going to take, for Hungarians, will take effect now. And Orban is not happy about this, so they kind of want to Hungary type educational system in that region as well. I don't know if it's kind of answers it, but
yes. We have 5 minutes.
Sure.
But thank you so much for your presentation. I have a question for you. So following your argument and knowing that my students have a paper due, a research paper due at the end of the semester, and knowing that you do research methods and you're an expert in this region, so your argument is what explains the difference in political violence, right, in these two regions. And your argument is about culture. Culture matters. So if you were going to pursue that argument, what type of sources or what type of research would you pursue knowing the conflicts that are existing in those regions?
No, absolutely. So it's thank you. It's a great question. The question is very much political science question. The answer is kind of sociology, anthropology question. So though there is a political cultural literature in political science as well, so it is somewhat interdisciplinary because the way I am choosing to pursue it involves reading some of the work in anthropology and marrying it to the work in political science. And the two literatures do not usually talk with each other, do not go hand in hand. And this kind of, would be your contribution there. So what is it that we can say? Yes, we can regurgitate something, that somebody else has said, which is, I guess, okay for the purposes of a paper. But what is it that we can put on top of research which is out there? So I'd say it's. It would take quite a bit of thinking, reading, and talking with the peers, with the professor, multiple professors perhaps, to make it work well. And then perhaps even enrolling for the direct independent studies if you want to take it to the next level. But yes, so just being aware that there are different literatures, and again, you will not find things in the very same source. And when you don't find source, do not freak out, do not be panicked. Actually, it's a good news. It means that you can put something on the top of things that nobody else had. And in fact, doing this literature review and saying, but it's not helpful for my question. I mean, they speak about relevant things and they say maybe important things. However, they don't look into this. They don't bring culture in. And there are a few of them to begin with.
Ideally, you could have public opinion polls, but it's impossible.
I did actually during the pandemic, before the war, during the pandemic. So I did pay in Chechnya about $13 per person. So the online polling. So you can, if you you can lend you some money for this. You can do the cold drinks. You can do the. I don't know how it's going to work out with the IRB though, because I think you're supposed to be cleared with with the institutional review board. And then I know some colleagues that will do it in the United States with Amazon Mechanical Turk. So it would be about it's $1 or so. But there's some venues out there. Absolutely.